Okay, last time we were talking a lot about setting in a family supper, and we were talking about how the setting was creating an atmosphere or a kind of vibe. So an atmosphere is like a mood or an emotion. A vibe I like. Just as the story is like developing, it kind of like washes over you as you're reading it. That's the atmosphere. A tone is a little bit different. We've talked about tone before, and tone is the author's attitude towards the subject. So how does this author feel about Watanabe? How does this author feel about the sun, etc.? That's the tone. The atmosphere is the word that we're looking for when we're thinking about what kind of mood does this story have, right? We talked a lot about the setting. You guys found 5 instances describing how this story is creating a mood through setting, and you wrote it to the side. That was one set of annotations that you did. We got through that, right? And we were kind of talking about it at the end. Okay, cool. So I want to do another set of annotations on this story. I think the dialogue and the style of the dialogue does a lot to establish the mood here as well. So how would you describe the dialogue in the story? Ash? You would describe it as moody? Okay, cool. Dark and moody. And if we're saying that it's like dark and moody, like both of those are kind of vague terms. Like, dark could mean like as much as evil, or it could mean depressed, So how would you clarify that? It's just, it feels dark. It feels like, here's a word I'm going to use. Ominous? Like there is something, some sort of like cloud hanging over all of these characters, and we know that something is about to happen. So it's kind of like ominous that way, Richard?
It feels very awkward. It's like, it seems like no one's telling.
Yeah, not telling the full truth. I really like that word staged. It feels staged. It feels like performative then, that like no one is actually being themselves in the setting. They're hiding something. You said secretive. Jack?
It feels like really abrupt. Like there's almost never a sense, or there's almost never like a full sentence, except when the dad's not there.
Oh yeah. So I like this, that there's a kind of like two styles of dialogue going on. When the dad is there versus when the dad is absent, and that when the dad is there, everything feels a lot shorter and almost like cut off. Yeah. Anything else we want to say about the style of the dialogue in this? There's also a lot of dialogue. When you read the Chekhov story, for example, it was like about how the guy wants to be able to communicate and yet like doesn't. So there's a lot more like descriptive language in that story. In this story, there is descriptive language at the beginning, but then the rest of it is almost completely dialogue back and forth. So I'm going to write up here kind of like quick as people are talking and trying to conceal things. They just sort of brush over stuff. Yeah, Zach.
As the topics get deeper, the long sentences get longer. And it seems to abruptly snap back to short sentences.
I like that. Deep topics equal longer sentences. And yet you say that there are moments that kind of snap back to abruptness. Okay, cool. So this is us describing what the language actually looks like on the page, right? And I think what's coming through here a lot is this idea that things are not being said. That as two people are talking to each other, they know that they're secrets, and we know that there are secrets, even though no one is officially telling us there are secrets. Like the son doesn't say, never comes in with his narrative voice, at least as far as I remember, it says, he's not telling me this, or I'm not telling him that. We have to rely on the dialogue to figure this out for ourselves. There's something about the way the dialogue is written that lets us know that it's not honest, and that it's awkward, and that it's not like fully the truth, right? And part of what that does then is it creates a lot of speculation for us as we read the story. We read this story and we are like, okay, either this man is going to kill his whole family with this fish, or the son suspects that the man's going to kill the whole family, but he's not going to. But there seems to be like secrets, like clues that we have to pick up. And the way we were talking about it last time, it almost felt like we were being detectives and trying to like pull out little details from this to figure out what is really happening. So that's kind of what I want us to do with this next set of annotations. I want you to find 5 moments when people are talking but not telling the whole truth. So you either suspect that they are lying completely, or you suspect that they are leaving some information out. Either way, we're going to count that as not telling the whole truth. So you're going to find 5 of those moments. And then in the margins, you are going to, it'll look like this. Let's say this is the text, right? And somebody says this, and then somebody says this. You're going to write an annotation here, and you're going to write a bit of dialogue that reveals the whole truth, the way that you understand it. So it's kind of like you're collaborating with the author here. The author has on purpose left certain information out in order to create this awkward, secretive kind of tone. And you're trying to speculate about what they are leaving out. And you're going to put that in the dialogue of one of these characters who are talking to each other. So for example, let's look just at the first page. It says, "Did you eat on the plane?" And the boy says, "They gave me a light snack." And the father says, "You must be hungry. We'll eat as soon as Kikuko." I don't know how to say it right. Kikuko. There we go. Kikuko. There we go. Arrives. What I think is missing there is both of them saying to each other, "I missed you." I missed you. Like, I'm glad you're here. I missed you. So in the dialogue, I would put to the side, I would say the father says, "I'm so glad you're here." And the father says, and the son says, "I'm glad to be here. I missed being here." You know, I feel like there's something there that is missing, that the father might be trying to talk about the snack idea, like saying, "I'm a father and I care about you. I'm glad. I want to get you fed. I want to nourish you." So that's what I think, but you might think like, "I want to get you fed. I can't wait to poison you." You can see it either way. So there aren't right answers here. It's just about speculating what is being said between the lines. Okay. That was a long description. Did it make sense? Does anyone still have questions? All right, cool. You can do this together, or you can do it on your own, however you want to. So you can do it with a partner if you would like, but everyone writes on their own page. Let me show you what to do next. So at the end of that thing, you have some white space. And you do on the back as well. Yeah, so you can either use this space down here. Actually, no, let's do everybody the same. So everybody just flip it over because you have a full blank space on the back. All right. In this class, we've been talking about how a thesis statement is a theme. And remember, your theme is a complete sentence. And it's complex and interesting, right? So it's not a cliche. It is something that, like, this author had some unique insight about human behavior. So it's a theme, and then it's plus literary qualities. So one of the ways that we've been talking about literary qualities is just describing them. We've been talking about how dialogue as a literary kind of technique has, the dialogue in this story has all of these different qualities to it, right? So you might say that Ishiguro uses abrupt dialogue, or he uses awkward staged dialogue, right? You can describe it in all of these different ways because you guys found the patterns in the dialogue and what it felt like to you. So you're going to write a theme, or a thesis here. You're gonna write a thesis about communication. So the steps here are to figure out, what do you think the theme is in this story about communication? What is the moral about communication, or the truth about how humans communicate? And then you're going to say how the literary qualities of the story contribute to creating this theme about communication. Okay, it's been like a week since we've written a thesis statement. So does that make sense to you, what you're supposed to do? Okay, cool. If you have questions as you're going, just raise your hand. I'll come over and visit. So you're just writing one thesis statement with a really good complex theme about communication. All right, so your first theme is about communication, right? And you're showing how literary qualities contributed to communication. I also want you to have a theme about the setting. So how do all of the aspects of the setting, which we talked about and that you annotated, so pull from your annotations. And then we also talked about how this father seems to be behaving in the way he does because of his commitment to a kind of tradition and a traditional way of thinking. So I want you to think about how the setting then contributes to a theme about traditional values. So just like this one was about communication, you're going to talk about how the setting creates a theme about traditional values. This will be your second thesis statement written down there. Okay, I stumbled over my words there. Was I still clear though? Okay, cool. And then we will be done with this story, at least for a while. All right. So there's information up here about each of these things, but also listen to what I'm saying. I'm going to stay back here because I have to record back here too. But listen to what I'm saying for the exposition and write down some notes here. So if you flip to the back, I want you to write down the definition of exposition. This is the information that introduces the characters, the situation, and the setting. Introduces the characters, the situation, and the setting. So a lot of times the exposition is like the first shot of a movie, where it's like, here is what the city is going to look like, here's what the characters look like, and then it'll have a little bit of talking that will like introduce us to those characters. That's what the exposition in a story looks like too. So a lot of times it's introducing like something that could potentially become a conflict. So right in the exposition, usually we get like a seed of a potential conflict somewhere in there, but we don't know it's going to be a conflict yet until the rising action actually starts. So we usually only recognize that seed when we read it for the second time and we look back. So now that you've read the whole story, flip to that story again, and I want you to use your blue marker or your blue crayon or whatever it is and share with the person next to you to highlight or underline the exposition of this story. So which part counts as exposition? All right, what do you think counts as the exposition in the story? Peyton? Just the first sentence. Yeah, the story's so short. They can't really spend much time on exposition, right? So if exposition contains some seed of potential conflict, which phrase in that first sentence would you say introduces a little potential conflict? Jack?
They once was a little boy, or they once was a mother.
Oh, you feel like that introduces the conflict. Okay, good. Tell me why.
Kind of, it's like the conflict about how the boy dies, and that's kind of like.
Awesome. So if there's two people, then the potential conflict here is that they're not going to be able to like live up to each other's expectations, you know, by dying, I guess. Xavier,
I think it was how the mother worshipped the child.
why would that introduce potential conflict?
Because it talks about like God taking the child. So
Good. So if she like worships him too much, then, and that word worship has such a strong connotation with it, right? Like if you worship somebody, that's putting a lot of dependence and faith on that person, and that can be potentially, like Jack was saying, like that can be an expectation that's not met. Then, Aspen. Yeah, when you exactly when you worship something, then losing that thing is going to like it's not just going to make you sad, it's going to like wreck who you are as a person. Yeah, because it's like takes away your whole like source of happiness. Yeah, Keegan.
In like the referring sentence that had a little boy of 7, which like shows that he's gone now.
Great point. Great point. That little word had right there showing the past tense, it like suggests that this is not going to go that well. Ash? The worship part? Yeah, that she's totally dependent. Okay, so we get the two people and we get the way that she depends. Yeah, Cap?
I've read a lot of stuff
So the word worship, right?
worship reminds me of those things where like a bunch of people are looking towards as a sort of God and expecting that person to help them or fix their situation.
Yeah, so you go back to Jack's point about how he is just a little boy of 7 years old, and that seems a little misplaced, right? This isn't a God that you should put all your worship in. Right, right. Okay, so that's the exposition. Go back to the back again. Let's talk about the inciting incident. Where did I write it down? I didn't write it down. Let's talk about rising action first. Sorry. No, let's talk about inciting incident. I'm winging it. An inciting incident is something that happens that disrupts the status quo. So when it's an event or a thought, something that happens that disrupts the status quo. And because the status quo has been disrupted, a character needs to make a choice. And this is the moment that turns the exposition into the rising action. So flip back to the story and use a green pencil or marker or crayon to circle what you think the inciting incident is. Okay, and before you reveal what the inciting incident is, let's go back, flip the page over again, and let's talk about the rising action. So the rising action begins with the inciting incident. It can also be called, the inciting incident can also be called a destabilizing event. So the rising action begins with a destabilization. And then it keeps rising. So if it was just that one little incident, it might look a little bit like a plateau or something, right? But it just keeps getting more and more complicated. So the action keeps rising because of complications, a series of events that introduce new conflicts or intensify existing conflicts. So again, the rising action begins with an inciting incident, but the reason that it is rising is because there isn't just one incident that destabilizes things. It keeps destabilizing things. More and more things keep happening to our character that, again, question that character over and over again. Like, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? So flip back over to the story, and I want you to underline all of the rising action in green. when it seems to have reached like a tipping point, the crisis point, that's when you stop underlining and read. All right, let's talk about the series of conflicts in this woman's life. So what did you call the inciting incident? Aspen? He suddenly becomes ill. Yeah. And then all of the things that kind of happen after that are all sort of rising actions. So tell me some of the rising actions in this. Ash? Okay, good. So crying at his grave every day, this is a complication. Bridger, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say,
When he gets buried, yeah, that's another one. Zach?
It starts appearing,
And the kid starts appearing. This is another rising action. Yeah.
It says I should pay because his butt and keep my butt.
Yes, exactly. So it's like her crying, her weeping, him appearing, all of these things are introducing more and more conflict, making the story more and more complicated, right? Where did you stop underlining for rising action? Okay. Mercedes.
Disappeared.
Where is that part?
When the morning king disappeared.
Ah, okay. So you're going to stop right there before the mother would not stop crying. It came one night. So before the boy comes in the middle of the night is where you're going to stop with the rising action. Okay. Is that where most of us stopped? Okay, cool. So then that leads me to believe that you guys already know what the climax is, but let's get the climax written down. So a climax is also called a turning point in the story. It is the moment of the greatest emotional intensity. So turning point, moment of greatest emotional intensity. It is the moment when the outcome of the plot or the fate of the characters is going to be decided. So there might be stuff that happens after it, but this is the moment that everything hinges on. Sometimes you can think of it as it's changing from one state to another. It's changing. Someone's going to change from sad to angry, or from happy to sad, or from sad to happy. It's like a change in states. Ash? Ooh. Ignore that one. I don't have that one written down either. A complication is basically a pre-climax. So it's like, it's the biggest complication. I would say in this story, the biggest complication is the fact that there is a ghost. Yeah. Okay, so the climax of the story, or highlight the climax of the story in orange. Okay, so the climax of the story you already revealed is when the boy shows up and says, "Oh, mother, do stop crying, or I shall never fall asleep in my coffin, for my shroud will not dry because of all thy tears which fall upon it." Right? This is the moment of the climax, right? Where did you stop underlining for the climax? Mercedes? So you stop after the child presents this idea, right? Why did you feel like that ends the climax?
Because then it goes on to say like the mother was afraid, and that's like going on to like it's like starts to kind of go down. Where it's like kind of just explaining what's going on with her, whereas the child being like, I am here and I am saying this, that's like big.
I like that. So the mother's change from being sad and grieving to being afraid is that moment where like something is what that once was something else is switching. Okay, cool. Did anybody stop a little bit later? No, I kind of think that part of the climax might be the wept no more. Did anyone include that in the climax? Yeah, why did you feel like it was, Nat?
like, I don't know, it's all part of the story where it's like finally like kind of feeling that's what you know,
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I felt. So the boy introducing himself is definitely the emotional intensity of the story, but I think that her change is also the turning point. It needs to be included in that turning point. It's what we would call an epiphany. So I don't have you, I didn't write down what, like the word epiphany, but you write it down. So underneath climax, make sure that you write epiphany, EPIPHANY. Epiphany, and an epiphany is a new revelation of truth. So a climax usually contains an epiphany where someone learns something very important, a new truth. It's really tied into that theme. All right, and then a falling action. This is a release of emotional tension. It doesn't, a falling action will still have events in it. Things might still be happening, but the things that are happening are leading you to a conclusion. Nothing is like, the complications in a resolution are pretty easily resolved, because once somebody has an epiphany, they know how to respond to different kinds of complications, right? And so we see things like kind of like easing off.
See, that's why I would say like the mother was afraid that she
Yeah.
would do that.
Yeah, because it's like her easing. I totally see that. I see it. And a reversal, just to write down a definition right there too. A reversal is that moment of epiphany. So it is when somebody is sort of like changing from one thing to another. So that's why I totally get Mercedes' point that that might be part of the falling action right there. Okay, so flip back to the story and put the falling action in red. Or this kind of dark pink color, red violet. Okay, so the child showing back up and saying like, my shroud is nearly dry and I can rest in my grave. This is the falling action. This is where like, it's kind of like, she's made her choice. She's had her epiphany and now she is going to behave in that way. All right, and the last definition, man, I timed this so that we have to really hurry. Conclusion or resolution. This is this is where you get a sense of closure. So it's like the plot begins with a situation and that situation is destabilized. The conclusion shows the situation becoming stable again. Some stories do not have a resolution or conclusion. A family supper does not have a resolution or conclusion, right? And that leaves us a very unstable feeling. That's for a purpose. But a story like this, a very traditional story, will have that conclusion that shows, and this is how everything is going to be from now on. It kind of is a return to a bit of a status quo. Yes, things have changed, but we now have a sense of things being stable again. So use yellow and underline the conclusion for me. All right, and then you're gonna keep that paper for next time. And just kind of return your writing things, your writing implements. everything, go ahead and keep on. Thank you. Okay, yes. Have you ever noticed, and then one of them being like Thanksgiving? No, I didn't either. Someone went by this. I was so confused. I've never noticed the like the Justice League like dinner. Oh, isn't that great? I wonder if I'll hide it. Wonder Woman is a little bit unclothed. Oh my gosh. But I do really like it.
I don't really know. She just barely gave us.
Okay, I think she knows to go to this anyway, so.
Okay.
Oops, well, this one a little late. If you're still watching, you can definitely stop now.